So last time we have seen how to develop consistent numerical schemes of any specific order of accuracy using this so-called method of undetermined coefficients. So according to that, if you are given a governing equation, that is a differential equation, and if you are asked to approximate that equation by some other difference equation of some specific order of accuracy, you can do it just by taking some points and then you know approximating each of the derivatives in that equation by difference operators. So that is how, when you do that of some specific order of accuracy, then your whole equation, that is the difference equation, will be of the same order of accuracy. So you can develop numerical schemes of any order of accuracy that you want based on this method of undetermined coefficients. So, and also in a single equation, you can have different orders of accuracy. That is, you can have first order accuracy in time and second order accuracy in space. So we have such options there. So it's like, if you have an equation of this form, say, something like dou u by dou t equals alpha dou squared u by dou x squared. In this case, it's not always required to have second order accuracy in both space and time. You can expect to have first order accuracy in time and second order accuracy in space. In that case, you can do forward in time or backward in time, anything. Each of these will be only first order. That is first order, like you can just have uin plus 1 minus uin by delta t. So this will be of first order accuracy. Then this term can be approximated by some second order term. Say something like this. So now this has, well, this also has first order accuracy, right? Does it have first order? Does it have first order or second order accuracy? We have seen last time.
Second order. No, first order.
First order, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this has second order accuracy because this term will go off. That is,
Yeah.
yeah, this term will go off because you have.
For dou to u by dou x square, we'll have first order. We derived first order accuracy for dou to u by dou x square. No?
Yeah. For this, also it has second order accuracy only because the third derivative, that is dou cube u by dou x cube terms, will go off in this expression. Say, when you do this uj plus 1 plus uj minus 1, your dou cube terms will have different signs. So they'll go off. So the next term will be of order delta x power 4, and since you're dividing by delta x squared, there is one term here. So this will become order delta x squared in the final expression.
Yeah.
So you have second order accuracy for dou to u all. This thing has second order accuracy. So this way you're constructing for a single equation, you're constructing a scheme which has different orders of accuracy in space and time. It's possible to do that. So by using method of undetermined coefficients, not you can use any difference operator, like not just this kind of operator. You can use any kind of difference operator instead of taking the points in a central way, that is I plus 1, I and I minus 1. You can also take it like I plus 1 and I plus 2. That way it will be forward in space. So you can do such things as well. So the best way to obtain these difference operators is by method of undetermined coefficients, and you can have different orders of accuracy. So we have seen it last time, and also you have told that you have gone through Laplace equation, that is 5-point and 4-point methods, that is diagonal, 5-point and star kind of methods, right? The square, you would have gone through such methods. 5-point, 4-point
Yes.
methods. Yeah.
Yeah, ma'am.
So those kind of methods also can be derived by using method of undetermined coefficients. I mean, I just wanted to make you guys realize that it's possible for you to obtain those expressions that you get in these 5-point, 4-point methods from undetermined coefficients methods also. Okay, so you have gone through these things, so I just wanted to make it a point that it's possible to obtain those expressions from method of undetermined coefficients. You can try those. So yeah, this is something that we have seen last time. So everything that we did last time was for uniform grids. Let's say for a grid something like this, that is the grid spacing was delta x everywhere throughout the domain. Between any 2 points in the domain, the spacing was just delta x. Now let's see how to develop numerical schemes for non-uniform grids. That is when the spacing between 2 points are different at different regions in the domain. So here you have delta x, that is between I and I plus 1, the distance is delta x, and between I plus 1 and I plus 2, we have another distance, that is, we call it delta x1, and again delta x2 for between I plus 2 and I plus 3. So now we need a relation between delta x1 and delta x in order to get a scheme which involves these 3 points. So in that case, you just need a relation like this. There is a scaling kind of relation, or you can have any other relation that you want. That will depend on the grid actually. So depending on how your grids are located, you can have this kind of relation. So here I'm saying that delta x1 is alpha times delta x. It may be alpha may be big or small. That is, it may be greater than 1 or it may be less than 1. If it's greater than 1, then delta x1 is going to be bigger than delta x. And if it's less than 1, then delta x1 will be smaller than delta x. So that's it. So now let's just approximate I plus f I plus 1 and f I plus 2. Suppose you have some function, say f. How will you f a continuous function is a continuous function f. Now you do Taylor series approximation for such a function at I plus 1 about I. So when you do that, this will be your expression. It is fi plus 1 will be equal to fi plus first order term, second order term, and it goes on. Similarly, when you approximate fi plus 2 about fi, that is when you expand fi plus 2 about fi, you have this expression. Here, if you notice, instead of delta x1, we have, that is here the distance between fi plus 2 and fi is actually delta x plus delta x1, right? The distance between fi and fi plus 2 is the whole thing. So it will be delta x and delta x plus delta x1. So in that case, you approximate delta x1 as, you write delta x1 as alpha delta x, and you expand this fi plus 2 about fi. So that in that case, it becomes something like this expression. So now you just, this is just a simplification of that. I've just taken alpha outside from this term. So you get delta x into 1 plus alpha. So similarly, here you have something like 1 plus alpha the whole squared into delta x squared by 2 factorial. So now you have two different expressions for fi plus 2 and fi plus 1. You just approximate fi, you try to find this equation, that is fi plus 2 minus 1 plus alpha into fi plus 1. So scale this expression by 1 plus alpha and subtract it from fi plus 2. So you get such an equation. So now if you notice, you have obtained a term called alpha fi. You take it to the other side, and now you can approximate dou squared f by dou x squared using this equation. So now this is your expression. So order delta x cube is here. So you divide by delta x squared, this becomes order delta x. So this is your expression now for this is actually your approximation for second order differential operator. So you're approximating the second order differential operator by some difference operator which has first order accuracy in space. So here you can notice that you have alpha and delta x, both of them coming up. So in addition, in previous case wherein we had uniform grids, we only had delta x coming up in the picture. But here in case of non-uniform grids, we'll have the scaling factor also coming up in the picture. Like this is for non-uniform grids, wherein it was possible for us to write some kind of expression like this. So the point that we need to note here is for any kind of grid that you have, if you know the relation between any 2 points in the grid, that is some kind of relation like this, then you can go about getting the differential expressions for differential operators. That is, you can get difference operators for differential operators of and provided with some order of accuracy. That is, you can approximate your differential operator by some difference operator of some order of accuracy, not just this specific second order differential operator. You can also approximate any dou cube, dou power 4, etc., anything. So for unstructured grids, getting a relation is the most important thing. If you are able to get a relation between any 2 points in the grid, then you can go about finding the expressions for differential operators. But the problem is getting the relation. So for complicated grids, it may not always be possible for you to obtain a relation. But for some structured grids, you can always find relation. So because they have some structure, you can always have some relation. So this is for non-uniform grids. Now I want to give an exposure of to you guys on explicit and implicit schemes. So have you guys heard about explicit and implicit schemes?
No, ma'am.
Okay, fine. So now okay, let's just look at it from the point of view of linear convection equation. It's possible to do it for any kind of equation, any PDE. So now let's just take a simple linear convection equation and which has a temporal derivative term and a spatial derivative term with c as the wave speed, that is a constant wave speed. So now let's do forward in time for this and central in space for this. So forward in time, in the sense we are writing the whole equation from the point of view of let's say ui and n, right? From the point of view of ui n, that is from the point xi and at time tn. Okay, from this point. So now when you do forward in time, you look at ui n plus 1. So that's what it is. So this is forward in time. And when you do central in space, it's with respect to ui n, when you do central in space, it's going to be something like this. So both of these difference operators have been obtained by writing these terms with respect to ui n only. That is, the difference operators are written with respect to this point ui n. So now when with respect to this point, when you do forward in time and central in space, this equation is obtained. So here if you look at this equation, all the terms, like one term is at time n plus 1 and all the other terms are at time n. So now you can take the term which is at time n plus 1 on one side and all the other terms on the other side. So in that case, you have one quantity which is unknown and all the other quantities are known, because you will always know what is the solution at the previous step. Because if you are given a problem, you'll know what the values will be at the initial point. That is, initially you'll know if you're given some physical problem, you will be given the governing equation and you will be given initial and boundary conditions. So from the initial conditions, you will know what the value will be at each and every ui naught, say ui 0. At ui 0 you will know what the value will be. So if you know at ui 0, it will be possible for you to find ui 1 from this expression. This is for all I, okay? So you'll always know ui plus 1 0 and ui minus 1 0 also, if you know, since it's for all I. So for all the points in the domain, you'll know what the value will be at the initial time. So from that, you can evaluate this quantity ui1 at all points again for all I. Now at all points in the domain, using this equation, you can find ui1. So similarly, you can find the value for ui at every other time step using such step. Now you can, using ui1, you can find the value at ui2. It is not just ui1, you will require ui plus 1 and ui minus 1 as well. So at time step 1, if you are able to find, then you can find the values at time step 2. Likewise, you can go on for all time steps. So such kind of scheme is known as an explicit scheme, where it's possible for you to write the unknown in terms of all known quantities. That is, you have just one unknown in the equation and all the other terms are known quantities. So such kind of expression is known as, such kind of numerical scheme is known as an explicit scheme. So now going to implicit. So implicit is the other way around. So in that case, you here again, you consider the same linear convection equation. Now again, you write all the operators with respect to the point ui n. So now you do backward in time, so you have such a thing. Because with respect to ui n, when you do backward in time, you go to ui n minus 1. Again, with respect to ui n, you do central in space, you have the same expression. So now, if you notice in this equation, there are 3 terms at nth time step and 1 term is at n minus 1th time step. So I'm just taking this n minus 1 time step to one side and all the other terms which are at nth time step on one side, on the other side. So you're just separating the sides. So now I'm just replacing n by n plus 1 and n minus 1 by n. So that's okay, right? It's not a problem. So I'm just replacing n by n plus 1 and n minus 1 by n. So in that case, I'm getting, it's the same equation with just the time steps modified. So it's just for easy, this need not be done. I just did it for some representative purpose. It's not a necessity. So now if you write ui, it's not, see now you have 3 unknowns and 1 known quantity. So here even for here again, when you are given a problem, you will only know what the values are at the initial condition. So you'll know what ui naught is, but you will not know what these quantities will be. You don't know what these quantities will be because they are at n plus 1 time step. So from just by knowing, if you are given a problem at the initial condition, that is, you will know what ui naught will be for all I. But even if you know that, you cannot just find ui1 for all I, because for finding ui1 you will require ui minus 1 at 1th time step and ui plus 1 at 1th time step, which are not known for you. These are not known quantities. So it's not possible to directly find the value of ui1 just by knowing ui naught, because you require ui minus 1 at 1th time step and ui plus 1 at 1th time step. That is what this equation says, right? So you have 3 unknowns and 1 known quantity. So such a kind of a scheme is known as an implicit scheme. So wherein it's not possible for you to directly solve for the unknown easily. So in that case, you will have to go for some kind of matrix computation. You write this equation in terms of a matrix system. So I'm just taking, for simplicity, I'm just taking this term C delta T by delta X as lambda. So now the equation will be like, I'm rewriting the same equation with lambda, okay, just for convenience. So on the right side, okay, let me draw, this is a 1D problem. So it's going to be 1 to up to some n. So you have some grid points. So in the middle you have some I plus 1 and I minus 1. So instead of these i's, these are just single equations, okay. This I is anything in this expression. I can be 1 up to n in this expression. In the sense it can, so in this equation is valid for I between 2 to n minus 1, okay. If it's 1, then you won't be able to find I minus 1, because in that case I minus 1 will be 0 and you don't have a 0th point here. So at the boundaries this equation won't be valid, and even for n minus 1 you won't have I plus 1. That will be n minus 1 plus 1, which is equal to, I mean, for n you won't have. So suppose if you consider I to be n, you can't have I plus 1, which will be n plus 1, and you don't have an n plus 1 point over here. So I'm neglecting the boundaries. So in this, this equation is valid for I between 2 and n minus 1, okay. So now let's, but here I have written, these are the vectors I have written from 1 to n only. So on the right hand side I have written u1 n, I mean all the grid points are written at time step n, okay, u1 n, u2 n up to un n. And on the left side here I have written all the grid points at time step n plus 1, u1 n plus 1, u2 n plus 1 up to un n plus 1. So now if you look at this equation, I think it's straightforward. Just don't consider the first and last rows, just look at the other in between rows. So if you're writing this equation for u2, I'm just now I'll consider I to be 2. So now I'm writing the expression for u2. It will be u3 n plus 1 minus u1 n plus 1 equals u2n. So I'm getting minus lambda u1 n plus 1 plus u2 n plus 1 plus lambda u3 n plus 1 equals u2n. So this is what is the expression that I'm getting. So I'll write it neatly over here. So this is what is the expression we have. So just look at the second equation. So the second equation will get multiplied by the first 3 terms, right? Because first minus lambda, first row, minus lambda into u1 n plus 1 plus 1 into u2 n plus 1 plus lambda into u3 n plus 1 will be equal to u2n, and or rest other terms are 0 in this matrix. So we'll have only zeros here. Okay, getting it? Is there any doubt?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Just one small doubt actually. In the central difference formula, there would be a 2 delta x term in the denominator, because like there are 2 steps between I plus 1 and I minus 1.
Here, yeah. Yeah. That's a mistake. Okay. So let's just take lambda to be c delta t by 2 delta x, and this form will remain the same now. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So now it's fine. So this single equation has been, so all intermediate, it's clear as to how these terms are obtained, right? So now about the first row and last row. So I'm just not doing anything for the boundary actually. I'm only considering, I'm just taking that to be 0, or otherwise you can, okay, for the, let's just write this expression for u1. Let's just take I equals 1. In that case, you will have u1 n plus 1 plus lambda u2 n plus 1 minus u naught n plus 1 equals u2 n. So u1 n. So you have this, you have all these things, but not this one. So what do you do for this is now the question. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking this to be 0 here, or instead if you don't want to take it to be 0, you can just take this term to the right hand side, because this is a boundary term. You'll know the boundary condition, right? Anyways, if you are given a problem, you'll know the boundary condition, and u naught is a boundary term, so you can it's actually basically our grid points start from 1. Okay, 1 is actually the boundary term, but if you let's say if you want 0 flux, that is no flux boundary condition, then you can take u naught to be equal to just u1 at all time steps. So that way, if you know u1, that is u1 will be known from the boundary condition. So all the time, for all time, that is u1, since it's a boundary, you will know what u1 n plus 1 will be. So you can just take u naught n plus 1 to be the same as u1 n plus 1, and then you can go about you can take it to the right side. That is, you can take it along with this u1 n, you can take this term. That way you can just try to approximate the boundary terms here. That is, you can do some modifications that way. So it's here simply I have taken it to be 0. So let's not worry about boundary conditions right now. So yeah, this is how you solve an explicit scheme. So previously for an implicit scheme, just this equation that you obtained was enough. So just this equation was enough to find the solution. But here you convert this equation into a matrix system like this, and then now you can go about solving this matrix system. This is a tridiagonal matrix. You can make this bottom row, that is this, all the rows anyways here, it's a tridiagonal matrix, so all the terms here will be zeros. So you can make this, you can bring this to echelon form easily. That is, you only have to make this bottom diagonal 0. That is possible, right? You can just do row operations using the first, that is the previous, this point, and then you can make this bottom diagonal to be 0. After you do that, you can do back substitution. That is, I mean, have you heard of, I think you guys would be knowing how to solve this kind of matrix, is it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. So now you can easily solve the matrix for all the time. So you can, instead of making the bottom diagonal 0, you can also make the top diagonal 0, and you can go about doing forward substitution. So either of these are fine. So now that's what is called as Thomas algorithm. So you can do this kind of algorithm is known as Thomas algorithm or tridiagonal matrix algorithm. So Yeah, explicit schemes can be solved by a single equation, whereas implicit schemes require you to go about solving matrix systems. This is just for 1D. In 1D case, it is a simple tridiagonal matrix, but when you go for 2 dimensions, then you won't be having need tridiagonal matrix. You will be having 5 diagonals, but not all of them will be bunched in the center. Depending on how you write the terms over here on the right, I mean, you'll have another term, right? Along with you'll have u1 comma 1, something like that. So depending on how you arrange the elements over here, your pentadiagonals, the diagonals will be arranged in a different way. So there also you have to go about solving the matrix system. That will be quite complicated than this. So that is what is implicit scheme giving us. So in an implicit scheme, computation is comparatively difficult. That is compared to explicit scheme. So that is the only thing. In an explicit scheme, computations are easy, and it's always possible for you to find the solution at a grid point using just a single equation, whereas in an implicit scheme, you have to go about solving the matrix system. So yeah, this is what I wanted to introduce before going to stability. So now we are, okay, now that you're introduced to explicit and implicit schemes, we can go about doing stability for different kinds of PDEs. We'll start with parabolic PDEs initially. So yeah, I mean, any doubts until here? So as of now, you know how to get consistent numerical schemes using method of undetermined coefficients. This also you can, I mean, using that method, not just, you are not only getting consistent numerical schemes, but you are getting them of some specific order of accuracy that you require. So that way accuracy and consistency part are quite okay. I mean, are there any doubts in that?
No, ma'am.
Okay, fine. So let's go with stability now. So I'll start with parabolic PDEs. So both are same equations actually. This is a heat conduction equation, and this is a parabolic diffusion equation. Both are actually same. Okay. Just the coefficients and variables are different. Both are same equations. I'll be doing it with respect to this, that is heat conduction equation. So now let's do FTCS for this. It's an explicit scheme as we have seen earlier. When you do forward in time, and then it will be explicit. If you do backward in time, then it will be implicit. I'm only talking with respect to first orders. Okay, when you go for second orders, then depending, you know, if you do forward in time, you will have to consider more points anyways. It is not just ui and n and ui n plus 1 like in first order case. Like when you require higher order accuracy, or when you have higher order differential operator, in both the cases you'll have to go about adding an extra term. Okay, that way in that case only this will be known. These both will be unknowns. So this will be like multi-step method. So I'm just talking, when I say forward in time is explicit, it's only with respect to first order differential operator and for first order accuracy. Okay. So yeah, I'm doing FTCS for this equation, heat conduction. So we get something like this. So yeah, you can get this equation. You have, by now you would have known how to see this equation like this. So it's of first order accuracy in time and second order in space. So I'm just, instead of writing alpha delta t by delta x squared all the time, I'm just writing it as nu. So now, as we have seen, I think we have seen this in a hazy way last time. So now we'll go through it completely. So this is now, this equation number 1 is a difference equation to approximate this differential equation. So here Tjn is the solution that you Tjn plus 1. Yeah, it's this is the solution that you get out of this difference equation. So this is the numerical solution of the scheme, Tjn or Tjn plus 1. So Tj is actually the numerical solution of the scheme. Scheme is 1. Now when you put it in the computer, it will be actually Di. Sorry, these are all J's, okay? And from now, instead of I'll be using J, because in stability we'll have imaginary terms coming up. So for that we'll require I. So I'll be using J's only here. So TJs will be stored as DJs in computer, and that is TJs will have infinite number of terms. It's an irrational number, right? So a numerical scheme will give us some real number, which can have infinite terms, and if it's an irrational number, then we can't predict what those terms will be. So those will actually you'll have some term, then point, then decimal points, then those will be infinite. So that will keep going. Next, what DJ does is it will only take digits up to certain point, and after a while it won't take, depending on computer's capacity, that is the number of bits that the computer can store. Depending on that, it will only take values up to certain digits. Beyond that, it won't take. So that is known as round off error. The remaining part, this Tj minus Dj, will be Ej. That is the round off error. I'll be calling this by capital Ej from. So yeah. Now I'm substituting this expression in, since Tj is Dj plus Ej, I'm substituting that in equation 1. So we get something like this. So now in this equation, we have terms that contain both Dj and Ej, and they're all separate. So if you look at it, we don't have a combination like Dj into Ej or Dj squared or Ej squared, something like that, because it's a linear equation. Since the differential equation itself is linear, and when we did the when we approximated the differential equation by a difference equation, this equation is also linear in T. We don't have Tj squared here. Any higher powers of Tj are not here. So it's just linear in T. So when we substitute Dj and Ej inside this equation, this is also linear in both Dj and Ej. So now, so I told you Dj is of one order and Ej is of a different order, because order one, Tj is going to be some number into point of something, right? So depending on what this number is, if this number lies between 1 to 10, then this number is of order 1. And if it lies between 10 to 100, then this is of order 10 power 1, and so on. If it's more than if it lies between 100 to 1000, then it's of order 10 power squared. Depending, it will go on like that. This is for Tj. If you look at Dj, that will also have the same number here. These two numbers will be same in Dj. Only thing is, it won't have the decimal points after a while. So Tj and Dj are of same orders. If you look at Ej, that is only the difference between Tj and Dj. Okay, so in that case, Ej will be of that order, like it. I mean, let's say if dj has taken values of tj up to say 10 digits. So now ej will be of order 10 power minus 10. If it has gone up to 20 digits, then ej will be of order 10 power minus 20. I mean, is that clear? Any doubt?
No, ma'am. No doubts.
Okay. So now dj is of one order and ej is of a different order, and they are both lying in the same equation. I mean, combinations of them. Like we have both dj and ej in the same equation, and this equation is linear as well. So just I'm okay. I'll just take this equation. Okay. Now let's just write this equation as something like this: djn plus 1 minus djn. So I'm just rewriting this equation in this way. So you have this equation has been rewritten as something like this. Okay. So now all the terms in this equation, they are of some order, say 10 power 1 or whatever. Let's just say it's of some order. And this is of order, say 10 power minus 10. And both of them should add and give us 0. I mean, when is this possible? Like, is it possible for these 10 power 1 terms to nullify this 10 power minus 10?
No, ma'am. They should individually be 0.
Yeah. So that way they should individually be 0. So that is the thing. So since they are of different orders, they should individually be 0. But remember, this is only possible when things are linear, okay? Suppose if we had combinations of dj and ej, then the orders will be different, and then we can't go about such arguments so easily. In that case, making these arguments will be quite, I mean, hindered. It won't be straightforward. Like, because we'll have other digits of different orders. Then we'll have to look at the orders of both the terms, and that will be of some other order. It'll be 1 plus minus 10. So it'll be minus 9. So that case, we'll have some other terms coming up. This need not be just 1 all the time. It can be 10, 100, and so on. So that in that case, this won't be so straightforward. So this is possible only for linear systems, and this kind of argument is easy only for linear cases. So that is why we are separating the two equations. So since they should be individually be 0, from this equation, from this equation, we are getting two different equations. So now we have got some equation, that is EJ. This is an equation just in terms of error. So it doesn't have any terms, any dj terms in this. So what's the motto of stability is to see how error grows over time. So for that we require some error equation, right? So for linear case, it's possible for us to get a neat equation consisting of terms only consisting of only error terms and not any terms of dj. So we have got some nice error equation. So this is also possible only for linear cases. So now that we have gotten some error equation, we go about doing the Fourier transform. So we are writing ej at n as, like, these are both same, okay? J is written at xj. So these are actually both same. So we are transforming xj to k. In Fourier transform, we just transform one variable to other that is one variable to another variable. That's what is actually happening. So the kernel that we take for Fourier transform will be something like this. In some cases, we'll have minus. Fourier and inverse Fourier transforms will have plus and minus interchangeably. So it doesn't matter which one we take actually. So I'm just taking e power ik xj. Xj gets converted to k through this transformation. So Fourier transform of ej at n will be e cap k at n. So, and this will be the inverse actually. Fourier transform of e cap k at n will be ej at n. We'll have some coefficients 1 by root 2 pi or 1 by 2 pi, something coming up. So let's just not consider, I mean, even if we consider that, it will go about in the same way, because, you know, finally we'll be leaving out this, the whole integration thing can be, I mean, I'll tell you why later on. So let's just now consider that a Fourier transform is taken, and substitute this in place of each of these quantities. So for this, it will be ek cap at n plus 1 e power ik xj dk. And similarly, this is rewritten in this form. And e power ej plus 1 at n will be e power ik. Here you'll have xj plus 1, and this is just e cap n only. And this will transform into e power ik xj, and here you'll have, instead of for e power, error at j minus 1, you'll have exponential ik xj minus 1. So if you notice this carefully, xj plus 1 is actually xj plus delta x, and xj minus 1 is xj minus delta x. So I'm just writing this whole equation in a simple way. That is, I'm just combining all of, I'm taking this integral, I'm putting, since all of them have the same integral, and the integration is done over the same variable, I'm just writing them together. So e cap n plus 1 minus this term, and here xj can be taken common outside, and so we'll have, when e power ik xj is taken out, you'll only have e power ik delta x remaining. So similarly here you have e power minus ik delta x, and this is just minus 2 here. So since e power error at k, I mean this term, if you look at it, it has been taken out evenly. So now you have an integral something and into e power ik xj dk equals 0. So for this integration to be 0, you require this term to be 0. There is no other way, because the limits are different. So the only possibility is for this integrand to be 0. So e power ik xj is not 0. So this has to be 0. So you're just taking this as 0. So finally you've gotten some expression like this. So this is why I said coefficients is, even if you have 1 by root of 2 pi or 1 by 2 pi, whatever the coefficient is, you will be taking it common out, and finally you will be only arguing, you will only consider this integrand anyways. So this is not going to be affected because of the coefficient, so I just ignored the coefficient. So you have some expression like this. So now if you look at this expression, you have some error at n plus 1, and you have error at n, and multiplied by some term equals 0. So now you can get the error ratio out of this. That is just divide this equation by error at n, that is this term. So you get some term like this into this equals this now. Just by dividing this equation by error at n, you get something like this. So now this actually is equal to 2 cos k delta x minus 2 because of these things. So and cos k delta x minus 1 equals minus 2 sine squared. It's just cos 2 theta minus 1 equals minus 2 sine squared theta by 2. So you have something like this. So now your error ratio at different time steps is equal to some term like this. If you've gotten a good expression, 1 minus 4 nu sine squared k delta x by 2. So the main motive of stability is to see how your error grows over time. So for that we have obtained an expression. So this expression states how error grows over time. So what do we require out of stability? That is, the error must not grow over time. That is, the error that we introduce at the initial time step should not be, the error. I mean, at every time step we'll be introducing some error, but the error that we introduce at the further time steps, that at later time steps, must be smaller than the error that we introduce at the initial time steps. So error must not grow very fast. The error growth must be bounded. It's not like error is bounded, the growth of error is bounded. So so when you bound this term, that is, this for stability you require this error growth term to be less than or equal to 1. So this, they usually in CFD terms they call this as the amplitude ratio. So this is actually called as amplitude ratio. So for this to be valid, we require modulus of this term to be less than or equal to 1. So for modulus to be less than or equal to 1, it should this term should lie between -1 and 1. So now let's just divide this into two things. That is, for this you have a different expression. That is, for -1 less than or equal to the expression, you have one division, and for expression less than or equal to 1, you have another division. So let's consider the first division. So let's consider only this part. So here it becomes, when this 1 goes to the other side, this becomes -2 less than or equal to this one. And since both are negative, I'm making it positive by multiplying by -1. So this less than or equal to sign becomes greater than or equal to. And when you take divide by 4, and then you I'm just since sine squared k delta x by 2 is always positive, it's okay to take it to the other side, and 4 is also positive, so it's okay to take it to the other side without changing the signs. So I'm getting some expression like this: nu is less than or equal to 1 by 2 into 1 over sine squared term. So now for nu to be less than or equal to this quantity, if nu is less than, let's say there is this quantity can, let's say this quantity can lie anywhere in this region. This is a number line, okay? So this quantity, that is 1 by 2 into 1 over sine squared term. Let's just ignore 1 by 2. Let's just consider this 1 over sine squared term. It can lie anywhere in this, to the right of this one line, okay? Let's say. So now for your nu to be less than or equal to all of these, for we want our nu to be less than or equal to this term, right? So 1 over 2 of course is there, okay? 1 over 2 of this term. So this can lie anywhere over here, depending on what your k delta x by 2 is. So if suppose your nu is less than or equal to minimum of this quantity, that is, the minimum possible is this one. If nu is less than or equal to this minimum quantity, then obviously it's going to be less than or equal to all of these. So first let's just consider that this, so from this expression you're just writing this one, okay, for any k, that for which the minimum of 1 by sine squared k delta x by 2 will occur, minimum over k, okay? This is like this expression is minimum for some specific k, and that k will be taken to evaluate this expression. So that will occur for k delta x by 2 equals n pi by 2, okay? Because you know let's say sine squared n pi by 2 is 1. So when this is 1, this sine squared term will be maximum when you have n pi by 2. Otherwise, it will be less than 1 only. In that case, this term will be bigger. This term minimum can occur when sine squared term is 1. And that is possible for k delta x by 2 equals n pi by 2. And for n going from, n can be anything, uh, any natural number, any integer except 0. Yeah. And you obtain k as n pi by delta x from this expression. So now from this expression you get nu to be 1 by 2. Since you have taken k to be n pi by delta x, your sine squared n pi by 2 equals 1. So your nu will always be less than or equal to 1 by 2. So now this is one stability criterion. So nu less than or equal to 1 by 2 is the condition that we obtain by only considering this left part. It is this part. So nu is alpha delta t by delta x squared. So since you would have noticed this, we have just made this assumption, alpha delta t by delta x squared is nu. So from here we can see that alpha is less than or equal to delta x squared by 2 delta t. So there is a restriction on your diffusion coefficient. Alpha was our heat diffusion coefficient. This is a term in the governing equation. Alpha is a term given in the governing equation, whereas delta t and delta x are the terms in our CFD domain, that is the domain that we are taking, our discretized domain. So alpha is the given governing equation. So if we just fix delta t and delta x, we cannot have any alpha. Alpha is something that is given. We cannot fix alpha. So we need to fix delta t or delta x based on alpha, and not alpha based on delta t and delta x. So I'm writing this expression. This from the same thing, I'm getting delta t less than or equal to delta x squared by 2 alpha. So if I fix the grid size delta x, and for a given governing equation I have alpha. In that case, time step delta t will be restricted by these terms. So I cannot take delta t greater than this for stability. If suppose my delta t is greater than this term, then the numerical scheme won't be stable. So the error that you introduce will keep growing over time, and eventually you won't converge to the solution at all. So in that case, you won't be obtaining any solution. You'll only see oscillations or blowing up. So it's always important that you choose delta t such that this restriction is satisfied. So it's like you can either choose delta t or delta x. You can keep delta t on the right side and take delta x to the left side, and then you can fix delta t and keep delta x as a variable. Either way, but one of these should be interdependent. So this condition should always be satisfied. Essentially, this should be satisfied. Okay. This based on this, you determine how your delta t and delta x should be for your problem, that is alpha, for the given governing differential equation. So FTCS, so this is just one side, okay? That is this left side. Now let's just look at the right side, what happens. So 1 and 1 will get cancelled, so we'll have minus 4 mu sine squared k delta x by 2 less than or equal to 0. And this term is always positive. Sine square term is always positive, greater than or equal to 0, that is. And nu is always positive because it has alpha delta t by delta x squared. So delta t is always positive, delta x squared is positive, and alpha is the governing, alpha is the heat diffusion coefficient, that is always positive. So this is always positive, and 4 is also always positive. So this whole term, all of them are positive. And you have a negative sign here, so this always is going to be less than or equal to 0. So this is naturally satisfied. So if nu is greater than or equal to 0, then this is always satisfied. Okay. If nu is less than or equal to 0, then this is never satisfied. So this is one thing. So you require your alpha to be always greater than or equal to 0. Nu is alpha delta t by delta x squared. So your delta t and delta x squared are always greater than or equal to 0. So you require your alpha to be greater than or equal to 0. If your alpha is less than or equal to 0, then you cannot go about doing FTCS. But in any physical problem, alpha is always greater than or equal to 0, so we need not worry about it. So this condition is always satisfied for alpha greater than or equal to 0. But this condition you will have to check. Alpha delta t by delta x squared less than or equal to 1 by 2. So this you will have to see to it. You'll have to see that your delta t and delta x satisfy this condition for a given alpha. So otherwise your scheme won't work. So this is what stability is. Even though you construct a consistent and scheme of good accuracy, if your scheme is not stable, you are not going to get the solution. So this is it. So this is FTCS. I mean, we have done it. We have done stability analysis for FTCS of this heat conduction. Dou T by dou T equals alpha dou square T by dou x squared. It's a parabolic PDE. So now, as an exercise, can I extend for half an hour more? Is it okay, or shall we stop and continue tomorrow? Is it okay to extend, or shall we continue tomorrow? Like anything is fine.
I'm fine with extension today. Oh, not an issue. Others,
Others?
Yeah, ma'am, you can continue.
Okay, fine. So if it's okay for everyone, fine, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'll continue. So as an exercise, you can try this. So we have done, we have seen FTCS. As of now, we have seen FTCS. Stability for FTCS to solve a parabolic PDE. So now this for the same equation, we'll try other things. For the same parabolic PDE, heat diffusion, heat conduction, or heat diffusion, whatever. This equation, we'll see other things. So now that we have seen FTCS, you can try CTCS for the same equation. Like this will be dou T by dou T will be just, you'll have something like this, right? So this is central in time. Okay, here we have 2 delta T. So yeah, this is central in time and central in space. So here you have 3 different time steps, n plus 1, n minus 1, and n. So you have 3 different time steps in this equation. So here you may have 2 different amplitude ratios. It is Ej at n plus 1 by Ej at n, and you may also have Ejn by Ejn minus 1. So you just consider this to be of something, say just some amplitude ratio A. Like I've just told that this term is amplitude ratio. You can write this term as some A and then go about reducing this term. So here, whenever you encounter such terms, you replace both of them by A only. Since both of them are amplitude ratios, you can replace both these terms by A only. And then you can simplify them. That is, you can combine them now. since you have replaced both of them by the same quantity, same variable, you can combine them now and then you can go about doing the stability analysis. So here you can try this and see that it's always unstable. So it has no conditions. At least in FTCS, you could see that you could impose some condition on delta T and delta X to bring about stability. But in CTCS, you can see that it's going to be always unstable. You cannot impose any conditions to make it stable. So when that is the case, you call them, technically we call it unconditionally unstable. That necessarily is always unstable only. We cannot impose any conditions to make it stable. So this is a terminology used, unconditionally unstable. So now we'll go for BTCS. So this is for you can try CTCS as an exercise. I'll do BTCS now. Backward in time and central in space. So this will be an implicit scheme. So since we do, I'm not going with the initial part of writing the TJ as DJ and EJ. I'm just because EJ will again follow the same expression as TJ, right? So we have made enough arguments, I guess, to move from TJ, this expression, to this expression EJ. And this, for linear cases, this expression EJ will follow the same different scheme as your solution only. So I'm just writing EJ here directly. So this is the error equation now. So this is our error at different time steps. So here we have n plus 1 and n. So here again I'm doing this Fourier transform and replacing each of these terms by this Fourier transform. So this will be n plus 1 ik xj. Since this is at xj, it will be just xj only. So this is at e cap n, e power ik xj. So since this is at j plus 1, here we will have xj plus delta x. We have xj plus 1 and xj plus 1 will be xj plus delta x. So I'm just writing it directly here. And this is at n plus 1th time step. So this term is just e power ik xj and at n plus 1th time step. And this is at e power exponential at xj minus delta x, and this is at n plus 1. So now combining all of them together, I've skipped some steps here. So I'm just taking this integral and integral common and keeping all the terms inside. We did it last time, right? Just we'll have this integration and we can take all the terms common. And then we can write e power ik xj outside. So we'll have some terms inside. So those are these terms. So those will be equal to 0. From that equal to 0 equation, I'm getting such an expression. So this is the expression obtained from that simplification. I have not done the simplification here. So we have seen that simplification for FTCS case. So I'm not doing it here. So alpha delta t by delta x squared, here again it's being replaced by nu, just for convenience. So now if you look at it here, you have many terms at n plus 1th time step and just one term at nth time step. So since this is an implicit scheme, we have done BTCS and it's an implicit scheme. So we'll have more terms at n plus 1th time step and just one or two terms at nth time step. So that's what we are having here. So I'm just writing the terms in common here, just writing the terms for corresponding to the error at n plus 1 here, and this is the error at n. So we get such an expression. So now this is the amplitude ratio. To obtain the amplitude ratio, you divide this equation by error at n. So this will be something like, so that way you'll have ek cap n plus 1 by ek cap n into the same quantity that's over there equals 1. This we will have minus 1 equals 0, so that will be 1. So then this amplitude ratio will be 1 over this expression. So that's what I've written over here. So now this term is getting replaced as 2 cos k delta x. Because e power ik delta x is cos k delta x plus I sin k delta x, and e power minus ik delta x is cos k delta x minus I sin k delta x. So that will be 2 cos k delta x. So we have written it here, and 1 minus cos k delta x will be written as 2 sin squared k delta x by 2. So now the amplitude ratio is obtained as such an expression. We have 1 over 1 plus something. So we have obtained the amplitude ratio. Now we want modulus of the amplitude ratio to be less than or equal to 1 for stability. So for that we'll require this quantity, modulus of this quantity to be less than or equal to 1. So now let's notice this. Sine squared term is always positive, and mu is alpha delta t by delta x squared. That is always positive because for any given problem alpha is going to be positive, and 4 is always positive. So this term is always positive, and you have 1 plus something. So 1 plus some positive term is always going to be greater than 1. So this is always going to be greater than or equal to 1. So 1 over something greater than 1 is going to be less than 1, right? So 1 over something, this quantity is always greater than or equal to 1. So 1 over something greater than or equal to 1 is always going to be less than or equal to 1. So modulus of this is always going to be less than or equal to 1. Since this quantity is always positive, so modulus doesn't make any sense here. So it's going to be always positive. So this thing is automatically satisfied. So this requirement for stability is always satisfied. So BTCS is always stable, which means it's unconditional. Technically, we call it unconditionally stable. So we have different terminologies: unconditionally stable, conditionally stable, and unconditionally unstable. So unconditionally stable is like always stable, and conditionally stable is like if some conditions are satisfied, then it will be stable, otherwise it will be unstable. Unconditionally unstable is always unstable. You cannot impose any conditions to make it stable. It's going to be unstable all the time. That is, in that case, let's say here your amplitude ratio less than or equal to 1 is always satisfied, right? For BTCS, always stable case. For unconditionally unstable case, what will happen is you'll see that you'll get a requirement again. There again you'll get a requirement, but you'll see that this quantity is going to be always greater than or equal to 1, but not less than or equal to 1. So you cannot impose any conditions to make it less than or equal to 1. So that is the case when you say that your scheme is always unstable. So these are the 3 different things that will occur when you do stability study. So what have we seen now is like for explicit scheme, we saw that initially in the previous thing we saw that it's easy to compute. That is, we only had to solve a single equation to find the solution at a grid point. But it is conditionally stable. It's not always stable, but provided if some conditions are satisfied on delta t and delta x, if they are chosen in some way such that it satisfies the stability requirements, then it's going to be stable. So explicit scheme is easy to compute and it is conditionally stable, whereas implicit schemes are comparatively difficult to compute. It is you require matrix computations, and it's always stable. That is unconditionally stable. Most implicit schemes are unconditionally stable. So this is one thing, trade-off between explicit and implicit schemes. So here you do not have to worry. You can choose any delta t and delta x without worrying about the stability requirements. So in explicit schemes, you will have to choose delta t and delta x provided some conditions are satisfied. That way, but if you notice, it's always less than. Okay. If you notice it here, delta t is always less than or equal to something. So you cannot choose any time step greater than this thing. So in that case, if delta t is so small, then your computational time will be more, and you'll face some problems when your delta t is very small. It will take a long time for you to compute. But in your implicit case, it's not so. You can choose any delta t and you can finish off the problem soon. So these are certain things, that is some trade-offs between explicit and implicit schemes. Okay, now there are more to it, but we'll go to those things later. But for now, I think this is some basic introduction. We have seen all of these only with respect to parabolic PDEs. We have not seen elliptic or hyperbolic PDEs, and even in parabolic PDEs, it's just heat conduction equation. So all of these arguments are made with respect to the heat conduction equation, but still this part is quite general. So now we have seen explicit schemes and we have seen implicit schemes. So now let's see something partially explicit and implicit. So for that, we go to beta formulation. So it's something like this. It's just forward in time, and you have this alpha by delta x squared. Here. You have forward in time and alpha by delta x squared, and you do central in space, but you do it for you beta times into central in space at nth time step, and here it's 1 minus beta times central in space at n plus 1th time step. So they are at different time steps. So this corresponds to explicit part and this corresponds to implicit part. And here your beta lies between 0 and 1. So whenever beta is 1, this term is going to be 0. So it's you'll always be solving an explicit scheme. It's a pure explicit scheme. And when beta is 0, this term will be 0. So you'll only and this will be 1. So you'll only have this part. So that will be a pure implicit scheme. BTCS or pure implicit scheme. So it's also called as Larsen scheme. Maybe someone has invented it. So next is beta equals half. So you have half explicit and half implicit. So it's Crank-Nicholson scheme. This scheme is known as Crank-Nicholson scheme. So as an exercise, you can try stability analysis for this beta formulation as well. So here again, you'll have here you will have only n and n plus 1 time steps. So but you'll have two different terms coming up. Let's see, for explicit case, it was just one numerator alone. We had just this part. For explicit scheme, it was something like this, and for implicit scheme, you have 1 over something. In this case, you may have both the terms, and you'll have to analyze both of them separately or together, depending on how it looks like. So you try attempt the stability analysis for beta formulation as an exercise, and you also discuss about the special case when beta equals half, that is Crank-Nicholson scheme. So this is for 1D. So till now we have done different analysis for 1D heat conduction equation. So now let's move on to 2D heat conduction equation. So I'll go about doing explicit FTCS scheme itself for this. So consider a 2D heat conduction equation, and I'm doing forward in time here. So I'm using J and K. J is for discretization in X and K is for discretization in Y. Okay. And this is central in space for both both the terms. So this is of order delta t, and first order in time and second order in both the spatial directions. So since this also is a linear equation, so error equation will also follow the same expression as this one. We have seen it previously. So now going about with the Fourier transform. Here we are converting both x and y to k. Sorry, L here, because since we are using k for discretization in y, so I'm using L as the variable, as the Fourier transform variable in the Fourier transform space. So I'm using L here for that. So it's like x comma y going to L. So now using this transformation, substituting this transformation in each of these terms, you will get some expression like this. So it's quite big. So now like before, you just bring, because all the terms are having the same integral, that is they are integrated with respect to the same variable. So since all the terms have the same variable of integration, you can combine them all together, and then you can argue that the term inside will be equal to 0. So, and then using that equation, I have obtained this expression. So this is that, and now I'm just dividing this expression by the error at nth time step. So I'm getting something like this. So this is the amplitude ratio now. So we'll have terms like this. So initially for 1D case, we only had this much. For 2D, we also have the one corresponding to this other spatial derivative as well. So here again, this will be written as 2 cos L delta x minus 2, and this will be written as 2 cos L delta y minus 2, and we can replace this by sine squared terms, and we have gotten something like this. Like we initially for 1D we got only this part. For 2D we are also getting this one. So now for stability we require modulus of this amplitude ratio to be less than or equal to 1, and when we do that we see that this has to be satisfied. So now for this to be satisfied, modulus of this quantity less than or equal to 1 means minus 1 less than or equal to the expression less than or equal to 1. This again will have two different parts, this and this one. So this one, like in 1D, it only gives always greater than or equal to 0. This will always be true, because 1 will go off and you'll have minus 4 into this expression less than or equal to 0, and this expression is always positive because nu x and nu y are always positive. Nu x is alpha delta t by delta x squared, and nu y is alpha delta t by delta y squared. So those are always positive, and sine squared is also always positive. So this term is always positive, and 4 is always positive, and minus of positive quantity is always less than or equal to 0. So this is always satisfied. So this part is always satisfied. So we only need to satisfy this part. So going to that, we have something like this. So 1 when taken to the other side becomes minus 2 less than or equal to the expression. So doing simplification, we get something like this. We need nu x. Initially for 1D we only had just this part. So there we got nu x less than or equal to 1 by 2 by making arguments. Here let's just say we need to, this whole thing must be less than or equal to 1 by 2. For 1D case, just this was less than or equal to 1 by 2. So now let's just separate that into this less than or equal to 1 by 4 and this less than or equal to 1 by 4. If that happens, then obviously this whole thing is going to be less than or equal to 1 by 2. So that is the argument over here. So I'm just trying each of these separately. That is this term less than or equal to 1 by 4 and this term less than or equal to 1 by 4 over here. I mean we made arguments enough like earlier. This for this to be less than or equal to 1 by 4, whenever this is maximum, then maximum of this will occur is maximum of this quantity is 1, right? So I'm just putting 1. If maximum of this is less than or equal to 1 by 4, then anything is less than, for any L, for any value, it's going to be less than or equal to 1 by 4. So I'm just restricting the maximum of this quantity to be less than or equal to 1 by 4. So that will occur when sine squared term is equal to 1. So maximum will occur when sine squared is 1. So mu x less than or equal to 1 by 4 is the condition that I'm getting. I mean, any doubts here from like moving from here to here, like in that argument, do you have any doubts?
No, ma'am.
Okay, fine. So you get this condition, alpha delta t by delta x squared, and now you have a more restricted condition on delta t. It's like it should be less than or equal to delta x squared by 4 alpha. Similarly, for this thing also, you get mu y less than or equal to 1 by 4, and you have another condition on delta t. So delta t must satisfy both of these to have stability. So previously we had the restriction for 1D. It was just so this was the condition we had for 1D, delta t less than or equal to delta x squared by 2 alpha. For 2D it's by 4 alpha, and for 3D it will be by 8 alpha. So the time step is getting more and more stringent when you increase the dimensions. So for the same delta x squared and alpha, that is for same grid size delta x and for same alpha, if you increase the dimension of the problem, then your delta t is going to be more stringent. So that is, your delta t has to be more small when you increase the dimensions. So for higher dimensions, this is not a good thing, because for higher dimensions you'll already be having more number of grid points in the problem compared to one dimension. The number of grid points in 2 dimensions will be more than the number of grid points in 1 dimension. So obviously you're already having more number of points to solve, and that itself will cost more computational time. In addition to that, you need to restrict your time step also. That is, delta t for 1D is bigger than the delta t that is required for 2D. So in that case, because of this restriction also, your computational time will increase when you go to higher dimensions. So this is not really a good thing for higher dimensions. So this is one thing to take away from here. So just to note that like as you increase the number of dimensions, the stability imposes more stringent condition on delta t, which leads to increase in computational time. So yeah, this is the takeaway from this. So you can try the exercise as a part of this. So let's meet tomorrow. Yeah. Any doubts? Questions?
No.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll stop here.